Hello, welcome back if you've seen any of my previous videos here. In this video, we will have a look at mountains here in and around in Europe, in and around the Italian peninsula here, Italy for short. And these mountains that I have place marked here, they are basically the big ones here in the Alps in Italy and in the islands here, Sardinia, Corsica, and also down into basically all the way down to the Balkans and the highest mountain in the Dinaric Alps here. So these are sort of the big mountains here in and around Italy. And there is an order to these mountain distances that I'm going to show here. When comparing two distances, the ratio I'm going to show you is that between the kilometer and the mile. So the kilometer-mile ratio is ordering these mountain distances. So there is an order to how these mountains relate to one another. And I'm going to show this order here. And previously, if you've seen it, I've shown how big mountains, zero in on the Giza plateau, and the ratio between those distances are the kilometer-mile ratio. And previously, I've also shown here mountains in Europe that are ordered by the meter-yard ratio. So still going strong with the units of measurement here and precisely the ratios between them, to show that now mountains here are ordered by one specific ratio. That between the kilometer and the mile. Now I think I rambled on enough about that. So here are some of the very big mountains in Europe, and I thought we'd start up here in the Alps, the Alpine mountain range, the Alps here, the big mountain range in Central Europe, in Western and Central. And there are the really big mountains here. These four mountains are the dominant mountain peaks in the Alps. From west to east here, we have Mont Blanc, number one in the Alps, and Monte Rosa is number two. And in the Central Alps, or even the eastern, Piz Bernina is the highest. And further east in Austria, we have Grossglockner, the highest mountain in the very easternmost Alps. So these are the four, maybe you could say the four dominant mountain peaks in the Alps. But we also have here towards the Mediterranean Alps. The highest mountain is Monte Argentera, right there. And then if we move down the Italian peninsula, we come to the Apennine Mountains that run the length of the peninsula. And here in the northern Italy, in the northern Apennines, the highest mountain is Monte Simone. And if we go down into Tuscany, centrally here there is a volcanic mountain peak, Monte Amiata, that I think is the highest volcanic mountain in northern Italy. And if we go down here to the central Apennines in central Italy, we have number 1 and 2 in all of the Apennines. And that's Corno Grande here, number 1, and Monte Amaro, number 2. And if we go down to the southern Apennines to southern Italy, the highest mountain there is Serra Dolcedorme. And out into the islands here, Sardinia and Corsica, these two. Sardinia here, and its highest mountain, Punta la Marmora. And Corsica up here, and its highest mountain, Monte Cinto. And if you go to the other side of the Adriatic Sea here, we come to, I think this is basically Albania here, and the highest mountains on the sort of the west coast here of all of the Adriatic and the Balkans. If it's called Adriatic here. Nevertheless, here we have the Dinaric Alps running the length of the former Yugoslavian countries here. And in the southern Dinaric Alps, the highest mountain in all of that mountain range is Jeserce here. And south of that, we have an even slightly higher mountain, Mount Korab, that I think is the highest in all of the west coast here, running the length here. So these are two dominant mountain peaks here. And now we'll have a look at how these mountains are ordered by the kilometer-mile ratio. And I'll just add the distances here as best I can to see. So you'll see. We'll start up here in the Alps with two distances. Number 1 here, the first distance is between Mont Blanc and Piz Bernina. That distance is as 1 kilometer, compared to the second one, which is between Monte Rosa and Grossglockner. And that distance is as 1 mile. So first 1 kilometer and then 1 mile. And I thought I'd measure these to show you how sort of this isn't super exact, but very near exactly. So if you fly to Mont Blanc and measure to Piz Bernina now, and in kilometers, and compare this to the second distance then in miles. First Mont Blanc here, and the very peak is, I should also mention here, where I've put the pins on all the mountains that I show in any video, is where I've managed to find the very highest point on the mountain in Google Earth. Here in Google Earth. And on the Mont Blanc here, that height is 4,790 meters in Google Earth, and that's where I placed the pin. And I try to do my best locating that very high point on every mountain that I measure to and from. And if you try to measure, maybe you just type in the name of the mountain and fly there, and then you may have to do a little bit of work to locate the very peak you find in Google Earth. But that's how I've done it. So I've put the pins on the very highest points I find in Google Earth and measure from there. So here's the highest point on Mont Blanc, and let's measure then to Piz Bernina. In kilometers now, we have a distance of here, and here's the very highest point of Piz Bernina. In kilometers, if you see in the little measure tool here, in kilometers we have a distance of just over 243 kilometers, up to 243.2 kilometers. Let's say 243.2 here in kilometers. In one of the units, in one of the rows here. So let's now measure instead from Monte Rosa to Grossglockner in miles. And we should then find just over 243 miles here. And here is the very peak of the second highest mountain in the Alps and in Western Europe, Monte Rosa. Right there is the peak. So let's fly to Grossglockner. So here we should then have just over 243 miles to the peak of Grossglockner, which is just around here. And we have just over 243 miles. You can see the numbers here. A little bit more than we had in kilometers between the other two, but not by much. And if you zoom out, you see that the discrepancy is very small. It's about 150 or 200 meters discrepancy from this ratio to be perfect. But this is just one example, and it's very close then that we have the ratio here of 1 kilometer and 1 mile between these two distances, 1 kilometer and 1 mile. So that was the first pair, and I'm going to show a few more at least. I have 9 pairs of distances here, but at least a few more I'll show. Not to get the video too long and boring to watch, if you will. So here we have the next 2 pairs of distances. 2 distances in a pair. Grossglockner down to Monte Simone, the highest in the northern Apennines. And then this high volcanic peak, Monte Amiata, to the second highest in all of the Apennines, Monte Amaro. And here the ratio is again 1 kilometer Amiata to Amaro and 1 mile Monte Simone to Grossglockner here. So let's first measure Grossglockner to Simone in miles. And then the other distance in kilometers. So the very peak of Grossglockner here, and from there we measure to Monte Simone. And the peak we find here on Monte Simone, where I put the pin again, right there. We have a distance of around 2 to 1.18 or 2 to 1.2, we can say. 221.2, thereabouts in miles. That's now measuring kilometers between Monte Amiata and Amaro here, where we should find 221.2 in kilometers. So here we have the peak of Monte Amiata and to Monte Amaro, the second highest here in the Apennines overall. And 221.2 kilometers is what we and here is the very peak. And that's what we find, just around 221.2 kilometers, which is exactly what we had in miles in the previous distance. So very near exactly there again. And if I zoom out, I'll show you the next pair of mountains we look at. And I'll add those distances now. And then we find Corno Grande here to Monte Simone. So the highest mountain in the Apennines to Monte Simone. And then we'll compare that with the distance between Monte Argentera and Mont Blanc. So this distance compared to this distance. And here we have again 1 kilometer here and 1 mile in this distance. Let's first measure Corno Grande to Monte Simone. So Corno Grande to Monte Simone. In miles this time. And here we have the peak of Corno Grande here. Let's measure from there to Simone. And here we have a distance in miles of around 187.3, a little bit above and below. You can see it in the measurement window there. 187.3 in miles. Let's shift to kilometers and see what we find then between Monte Argentera and Mont Blanc, the second distance here. And right here we have the peak of Monte Argentera, and we'll measure in a little while in kilometers here. To Mont Blanc, the highest mountain in the Alps and in Western Europe. And we should find around then 187.2 or 3 even. And we have slightly shorter here. It's about 100 meters. It should have been 100 meters longer, roughly, for it to be perfect, this ratio. But when you zoom out, that's a very small discrepancy. So very near exactly here again, the ratio between 1 kilometer and 1 mile between these two distances. Let's take at least one more pair after this one. So let's add this pair of distances. And this time is again Corno Grande, but this time to Monte Amiata, a mountain we saw previously. And we'll compare that, which is as 1 kilometer, compared to this second distance, which is between the two high island peaks here, Monte Cinto and Punta la Marmora, which is as 1 mile. Let's first measure the shorter distance there, Corno Grande, Amiata. And in kilometers. And here again, Corno Grande to Amiata. Monte Amiata. Really. And here we are. And we have a distance here in kilometers around 166.25 kilometers. Just around there. 166.27, or let's say 25. And that's then what we should find in miles in the second distance we'll measure between. Namely Monte Cinto to Punta la Marmora, the island mountains out here on Corsica and Sardinia. So in a little while we have the peak here on Monte Cinto, the highest mountain on Corsica. When it clears up in a second. So I think we can measure now from the peak of Monte Cinto, right there, down to Punta la Marmora, Sardinia's highest mountain. And we should find just around 166.25 miles here. And here is the very peak of Punta la Marmora then. And we find just under 166.25 miles. Very near exactly. Here we have it. So very near exactly between these two, that this longer distance is as 1 mile here, and the shorter yellow distance here is 1 kilometer, almost exactly. Um, and after this, I thought it would be enough with one more example, and maybe I should do this one. No, I think I'll take another one here to go over to those mountains here in the east of Italy, in the old this region here, with the Geserce and Korab. Uh, so I think I'll add these distances. And here we have the distance from Geserce, the highest mountain in the Dinaric Alps, to the second highest in the Apennines, and the highest in the very easternmost um, Alps here. And this distance is very nearly as 1 mile, and this as 1 kilometer, as measured from Geserce. So let's look at that. First to Amaro and then Grossglockner. And right here in a little while, we have the peak of Geserce. I think it just has to clear up a little bit better here, maybe. Oh, we can probably measure now. To Amaro in Italy. And in kilometers now we have a distance of just over 474 kilometers. 474. You can see it here. Just over 474 kilometers. And if you go back to Geserce, we'll measure to Grossglockner then. And in miles instead. And we should find just around 474 miles here then. And here's the very peak of Grossglockner. And that's what we find, just under and just over 474. So again, in miles. So again, very near exactly between these two distances, 1 mile and 1 kilometer is the ratio there. And I think I should add one final example here to round this off now, with mountains here in and around the Italian peninsula, and no, not, yes, perhaps that one. This is how Monte Amaro relates to Serra Dolcidorme and Punta la Marmora. And I think it's here that Corno Grande it is. Corno Grande to Punta la Marmora is as 2 kilometers. 2 kilometers, while Corno Grande to Serra Dolcidorme is 1 mile. So let's measure and see if that's correct. First we can do miles to Serra Dolcidorme, the highest in the southern Apennines. From here then. And here we have just over 225 miles. And that means that the distance we should have in kilometers to the other mountain is 450 kilometers and a little bit over. That's a doubling of 225. So we should then find 450 kilometers in the second distance from Monte Amaro to Punta la Marmora. Let's see if that's correct. So here we have Punta la Marmora, and we are just over 450 kilometers here, which was a doubling of the 225 we had in miles in the other distance. So very near exactly again there. The ratio between these two distances is 2 kilometers and 1 mile here. There, these two. I think that's enough of examples. I had a few more to show you here, but I may very well get back to showing many more and other kilometer mile ratios ordering mountains in Europe. But after, I'm a bit under time pressure also. But after this, I'll make a video where I show how mountains in East Asia over a vast area is ordered by this very same ratio, exactly the same as the mountains here. The kilometer mile ratio is very common there, and I'll show many examples of that. So that's over and out for now, you could say. That's it for this video with European mountains and the sample area around Italy where mountains are ordered by the kilometer mile ratio for short.